Welcome back. I know some of you are like, oh my gosh, who taught him how to make the videos? Well, you got me now. So, um, before you start on this assignment, I want you to make sure that you're doing the rest of the assignment. Watch the video about William Steele. Do the little picture book about Box Brown, the guy that got in the box and mailed himself. Those are all people that are fighting against slavery. People are running away. So anyways, all of those things are going on. That's this week. So this is going to be something I'm going to post probably on Tuesday next week. So this will be up on Tuesday, and then you'll have to get through it. But this is really going to be important for you to understand why. Okay. So if you remember at the beginning of the year, I talked about there's going to be some stuff that's important that I'm going to teach you, and there's other stuff that's going to be way more important. So what are they? Well, the first thing I think in the 8th grade history year that you need to understand is what is the Constitution and how does our government work? And that's that big test that you had to take back in January, that you had to pass the test so that you can graduate from high school. Now, most of you did that already. That was probably the most important thing that we talked about this year. The second most important thing is, how did our country start? If you guys remember, we actually spent all of first quarter talking about the colonies, talking about the explorers, and we didn't even talk about the United States of America. So the second most important thing is, how did that start? And why did we have the American Revolution? And why did we have the colony split from the king? And why did they get rid of the king? Here we are, the third most important thing that we're going to talk about this year, and that's the election of Abraham Lincoln, the rebelling of the southern states about slavery, and the Civil War. Well, what does that mean? Well, here's what it means. When Lincoln gets elected in 1860, and it lasts till about April of 1865, the United States is going to fight the United States. The northern states, which have been free from slavery, are going to fight against the southern states, which still want to continue to have slavery. More than 600,000 Americans are going to die, over 500,000. And the question always comes up of why? Why? Well, I'm going to give you this paper and you're going to have to fill it out, but I'm going to help you fill out the first two boxes, okay? Now, I'm going to put a PDF editor on Canvas, a link so that you can edit this, type into it, and then repost it. Now, some of you may want to just copy it, right? Print it off, and then write it, handwrite it, and then take a picture of it and send it to me. You can. That's fine, okay? So however you do this, but we're going to do this together. All right, so I need you to look at this middle box part right here. So during the early years of the United States of America, slavery became a huge issue. Each of the boxes on this paper talks about a time when slavery was discussed, debated, and decided on. Now, some of these we've already talked about. So here's what I need you to do. I have 6 things, and what I need you to do is I need you to do it really, really a lot. I don't want you to write 2 or 3 words. That's not going to work, okay? I need you to understand what happened in each of these things about slavery and how it continued to roll slavery into the future. Okay? All right, so let's start with the oldest one. That's the 3/5 compromise. I've already filled it in. All you have to do is copy it down. So during the discussion about the US Constitution, right, after the colony split from the king, after they got rid of the king, they had the Articles of Confederation. The Articles of Confederation didn't work, so they did the United States Constitution. Slavery was discussed. But in order to get the southern states to get involved in the country, they had to have a compromise. The southern states were ready to walk away if they said, we have to get rid of slavery. So the compromise is called the 3/5 compromise. Now, when they were determining how many people would be in the House of Representatives, remember the House of Representatives, you get so many people in the House of Representatives according to your population. Well, the southern states wanted to use their slaves as counting for people for the House of Representatives. In the Senate, you just get 2 votes. Well, the people in the North were like, that's screwed up. You can't use the slaves for population because they're slaves. So the compromise was they would count the slaves as 3/5 of a person as far as representation and for taxes. So for example, if you were a slaveholder who had 50 slaves, those slaves would count for 30 people for representation. That's why it's called the 3/5 compromise. If you had 5 slaves, they would count for 3 people, okay? The founding fathers made this compromise and said, we'll talk about it in the future. The whole idea was they didn't want to deal with it. And they knew that when they talked about it in the future, they would be dead and they wouldn't have to deal with it. So who would have to deal with it? Their sons and grandsons. All right. About the same time, we started to have these fugitive slave laws. Next one. Because so many slaves were running away and it was costing the southern plantation holders a lot of money, they finally got a bill passed, legislation, a law passed that said it is illegal for people to help runaway slaves. The first fugitive slave law was passed in 1793. It wasn't very strong and people didn't listen. A lot of slaves ran away. And so as more and more slaves are running away, the slave owners are losing money. So the second fugitive slave law was passed in 1850, and it's associated with the Compromise of 1850. You're going to notice it up in the top right corner up here. This is going to be part of this. This fugitive slave law of 1850 was much more strict. In fact, if a slave made it to New York or Boston or Chicago, and people could find them in those free states, they could take the slaves back. So one of the things you're going to find that after 1850, after this very, very strict fugitive slave law, the only way a runaway slave was going to be safe is if they made it all the way to Canada. Okay? So that's all I'm going to do with you. I'm going to do those 2 boxes. We've really already done the Missouri Compromise, okay? The Compromise of 1820, so you're going to have to go back and look at your notes on that. There's 4 things that it does, okay? Then we have the Kansas-Nebraska Act of 1854. I want you to talk about what that does and how that talks about slavery. We have the Compromise of 1850. Those are some very important things. Utah becomes a territory in 1850. So that's part of that. And then this is actually a Supreme Court decision. Dred Scott was a slave that was taken to the North, and then he sued for his freedom in 1857. So all of these things are going to kind of push slavery and dealing with slavery to a next generation, which is going to cause a problem. And so what's going to happen is Lincoln is going to get elected in 1860, and he pretty much has said, I'm not going to allow slavery to grow. So anywhere in the West, he says, I'm going to keep slavery out of there. Well, the southern states know, the southern states know that if slavery doesn't continue to grow, then it will die. So they quit the United States. In 1861, before he gets inaugurated, 9 states secede from the Union, start their own country, form their own constitution, elect a president, and Abraham Lincoln says, you can't do that. And then it means war. So I really need you to understand how each of these 6 things dealt with slavery, because it's going to eventually lead to war. Not war with another country, war with each other, war with the United States of America. I want you to imagine today, if Utah went to war with Texas, what would that look like? What would people think? Anyways, as we go into this, I'm going to try and make one big assignment a week. This is not a big assignment, so there'll probably be something else going with this next week. But again, look for this either Monday or Tuesday, and then probably something later in the week. But we really need to get into the Civil War and talk about the Civil War and talk about things like that. Thanks.